It was supposed to be just another routine, hearing another woman processed, silenced, and discarded by a judge who believed his robe made him untouchable. But this time, he chose the wrong woman. Because behind those composed eyes and that quiet strength stood someone far more powerful than anyone in that courtroom could have imagined. What started as an apparent humiliation would unleash a storm one that would unravel decades of corruption, shake the very foundation of the courtroom, and ultimately leave a once mighty judge begging for mercy. You may think you know where this is going, but trust nothing prepares you for the moment truth walks back through those courtroom doors. They say you can feel it before it begins as stillness, the weight of something bigger coming. And that morning, inside the historic courthouse in Old Savannah, Georgia, the entire room seemed to be holding its breath. The ceiling fan squeaked overhead. Humidity clung thick in the air between the wooden pews. Every eye was fixed on the woman standing alone at the defense table. She didn't belong in handcuffs. That much was obvious. Her back was straight, chin lifted. She had the air of someone who'd stood before kings and presidents, and in a way, she had. But no one here knew that. To them, she was simply Veronica Haisa's 62-year-old black woman facing charges of obstructing police orders and resisting arrest. Her case had been squeezed into Judge Conrad Maddox's morning docket, slotted between petty theft and a traffic infraction. Just another name, just another case. Except she wasn't. She wore a plain charcoal suit, no jewelry, no purse, not even a folder. Her hair, tightly coiled, was swept neatly back. Her face? Calm. Not defiant, not afraid. Just observant. The courtroom buzzed in low murmurs as she stood there, saying nothing. Then the side door swung open. Bang! Judge Conrad Maddox entered. Maddox wasn't just a judge, he was legacy. A fourth-generation white patriarch of Savannah's legal elite. His grandfather had built this courthouse. His father presided here for decades. And now Maddox sat on the same bench, acting as if justice were his inheritance. He didn't look at her right away. He threw down a stack of files, sighed theatrically, and took a long pull from his black coffee before raising his eyes. Then he saw her. Something in his face shifted. It wasn't confusion, it was irritation. Maybe even unease. She didn't match what he expected from someone in handcuffs. She didn't look broken. She didn't look like someone begging for leniency. She looked ready. "This should be quick," Maddox muttered, leaning into the microphone. "State versus Veronica Hayes." She didn't flinch. "MS. Hayes," he said slowly, his tone dripping condescension. "Do you understand why you're here today?" She met his gaze with the kind of quiet confidence that infuriates weak men. "I understand why you think I'm here." One sentence. That was all. But the whole room tensed. A whisper passed through the gallery like wind. Maddox's eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" She remained silent. "You think this is a game?" he barked. Still nothing. "This is my courtroom," he snapped. "My rules. You speak when spoken to. And you," he pointed at her, "are not above this court." Finally, she responded. "Cool. Measured. I never said I was above it. I'm just not beneath it either." The gavel slammed, so hard the stenographer jumped. "Contempt," Maddox roared. "Bailiff, restrain the defendant." The bailiff, an older black officer named Leonard, paused. It was noticeable. A beat too long. Then he approached her. She didn't resist. She extended her wrists with grace, like it wasn't the first time someone had tried to bind her. The cuffs clicked. Someone in the back whispered, "She's not like the others." And she wasn't. She didn't yell. She didn't plead. She turned and looked at every face in the room, one by one, as if memorizing them. Maddox bristled. "You want to play tough?" he barked. "Let's see how you enjoy a night in holding. Maybe that'll remind you who's in charge." As the bailiff led her away, a young reporter named Miles Carter clicked his pen. "I've seen her before," he whispered to the journalist beside him. "That's not just some random woman." His colleague rolled her eyes. "They always say that." But Miles was right, because just a few miles away, a Department of Justice server lit up with a classified alert. Subject: Chief Justice Veronica Monroe last seen en route to Savannah. Possible breach in federal protocol. Back in the courtroom, Maddox adjusted his robe and muttered, "Another one trying to make a scene." But for the first time in years, he looked unsettled. And the room once filled with humidity and silence sensed something else. This wasn't over. In fact, it hadn't even started. The next morning in courtroom 2C, you could smell it in the air. Fear. Not from the crowd. Not from the woman now back at the defense table, wrists unbound, posture unchanged. But from a bench. Judge Maddox entered 5 minutes early. That never happened. He usually made people wait to remind them who was in charge. Not today. He walked in briskly, robe flapping like a storm cloud behind him. He didn't scan the gallery. He locked eyes with Veronica Hayes. She was wearing the same suit. Still no lawyer. No notes. Just that expression, that infuriating calm, like she'd already seen the ending. "You again?" Maddox sneered. He flipped open her case file, though he'd clearly memorized every line. "I was hoping you'd come to your senses overnight. But I see we're still playing games." She said nothing. "You think you're clever?" He snapped, louder than necessary. "You think you can mock my authority, walk in here and walk out untouched?" Still silence. "You think because you're articulate, because you wear a clean suit, that you're different?" The gallery shifted. "You're not different," Maddox said. "You're just another mouthy defendant who doesn't know her place." She raised her chin. "Clear as a bell," she said. "I know exactly where my place is." "Do you?" Dead silence. Even a stenographer paused. Maddox leaned forward, voice shaking. "You think that tone earns respect? You think you can challenge me?" "That's not a challenge," she replied. "That's a question." He slammed the gavel. "This is not a college debate. This is the law. And when I say sit down and shut up, you do exactly theta you pay the price." She didn't blink. "I understand the law," she said. "More than you ever will." He exploded. "Bailiff, restrain her again. Leave the cuffs on this time." Leonard hesitated, then complied. She extended her wrists. "Calm. Like this wasn't new." "You are in contempt," Maddox snapped. "And until you learn humility, you'll sit in a box and think about how you got here." She turned to him. "Do you ever think about how you got here, Judge?" Her voice was quiet, but it echoed through every corner of the room. "I earned this robe," he growled. "My father wore this robe." She finished for him. "Your grandfather built this court. And none of you ever learned what justice meant." Even his clerk dropped her pen. He returned to his bench, breathing hard. But it was too late. The mask had slipped. Outside, reporters reviewed courtroom audio. A video clip leaked 2 minutes long. It showed a black woman in handcuffs standing still as a judge screamed at her. And in a voice like granite, she said, "Power doesn't make you just. It makes you dangerous when you think it does." By sunrise, it had 78,000 views. The question began circulating. Who is she? By 9 a.m., Homeland Security had been notified. DOJ phones were ringing off the hook. Federal marshals arrived quietly at the holding facility. No lights, no sirens. They didn't ask her to come with them. They informed her. She walked between them like a diplomat. In a secure room, they handed her a phone. She dialed, spoke calmly, issued instructions. At the Department of Justice in D.C., a red file landed on the Attorney General's desk. Chief Justice Veronica Monroe, classified travel, breached awaiting extraction. Back in Savannah, Judge Maddox was pouring scotch into a coffee mug. He hadn't answered a single call that morning. By 10 a.m., Homeland Security was waiting outside his chambers. Judge Maddox, the lead agent, said, "We need a word." Inside a quiet federal suite, Veronica Monroe refused evacuation. "I'm not here to disappear," she said. Her voice never wavered. "I'm here to remind them. Truth doesn't hide." An hour later, a black SUV pulled up. She stepped out. No robe. No security detail. Just that gray suit. She walked back into the courthouse. This time, there were no handcuffs. Only silence. She opened the door to Maddox's chambers. He didn't stand. "I have every right to be here," she said. "I outrank every person in this building." "This is still my office," he muttered. "No," she replied. "It's not yours anymore. This was never justicite, was performance." She pulled a small flash drive from her blazer. Transcripts, buried testimonies, clerk confessions, everything, He stared at it. That's not admissible. I'm not prosecuting you, Conrad. I'm exposing you. His jaw trembled. Why now? Because you never saw me, she said. You looked at me and saw a problem, not a person. Outside, the sounds of agents grew louder. What happens now? He whispered. She picked up his gavel, turned it over in her palm, then placed it gently on the desk. Now, she said, you find out what justice feels like. And she walked out. The indictment was swift. Federal charges for judicial misconduct, civil rights violations, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. The footage of his arrest handcuffed, silence spread like wildfire. Inside a D.C. conference room, Monroe watched the news feed. She didn't smile. This wasn't vengeance. It was accountability, and it was only the beginning.